India has active territorial dispute with China, report. Give a brief note on India and China border dispute. What do you know about McMahon Line between India and China? Why India has sought to improve its defense partnerships with the US? And why it is a matter of concern for China? GS Paper 2, India and its neighbourhood. What is the context about? The report, titled Asia-Pacific Regional Security Assessment 2017, and released at the Shangri-La Dialogue, notes that India is increasingly worried about China's build-up of military forces and infrastructure, along the disputed Sino-Indian border. India has an active territorial dispute with China, and is unhappy about the communist nation's apparent efforts to stifle its ambitions in multilateral fora, such as the UN and NSG. Give a brief note on India and China border dispute. The border issue between India and China includes Aksai Chin on westernmost side of border and McMahon Line, Arunachal Pradesh on easternmost side. China had a map that claimed in parts of Indian territories south of McMahon Line in current Arunachal Pradesh and Aksai Chin. The Chinese claims on areas south of the McMahon Line were based on their perceptions of traditional boundaries. Out of these two disputed regions, the strategic importance of Aksai Chin for China was of great value. Though it is an uninhabited high-altitude desert, it was essential to Chinese control of western Tibet, and very important to its control of all of Tibet. Thus, on Aksai Chin, while the Indian claims were legalistic and nationalistic in nature, the Chinese claims had geopolitical imperatives. What do you know about McMahon Line between India and China? The McMahon Line is practically a psychological border between India and China. It was drawn up by British India and Manchu China, but its subsequent repudiation by China made it the major irritant. The drawing of the McMahon Line was a bit of British mischief that shaved off parts of Tibet and present-day Pakistan, and included them in British India in order to create buffer zones. Negotiated at the Indian town of Shimla in 1914, the McMahon Line was apparently an egregious exercise in imperial cartography, defining the border only with a thick red line on a map without reference to the usual local landmarks employed to demarcate a border. No Chinese government has accepted the McMahon Line as the proper demarcation of the border. India, however, has embraced it. Why India has sought to improve its defense partnerships with the US. Based on shared concern about the rise of China, India has sought to improve its defense partnerships with the US and several regional powers. The proximity of China and Pakistan, and their strategic alignment, would require India to forge close ties with the United States. And why it is a matter of concern for China. The defense partnership has been blossoming, growing and expanding over the last many years. In 2005, India-US Framework Agreement on Civil Nuclear Cooperation was signed. This was renewed in 2015. US, in a bid to retain its domination, has devised this strategy, which includes balancing nations like India and Japan putting in direct face-off with China in its geopolitical aim. Recently, India was designated as a major defense partner. This is a designation that the US provides to its NATO members, to its allies like Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and South Korea. India will also be stepping into these ranges of countries. US has become the second largest supplier of defense equipments to India with orders more than $15 billion. Thus China is worried